Welcome to another episode of the Edmonds Mom's Room podcast. I'm Dr. Allison Felt, owner of Body Motion Physical Therapy here in Edmonds, Washington. And today we are so delighted. We have Ashley Wires of Rove Perinatal Services with us today. So welcome, Ashley.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So tell us a little bit about yourself. We'll start right off the bat.
Yeah, so I grew up in Mukilteo, so right next door.
That's so exciting.
Yeah, and I went to Western Washington University for my undergrad. So I was up in Bellingham for 4 years. So I hung out in the Pacific Northwest for college, and I studied sociology there and ended up interviewing midwives and doulas for my senior capstone project. And that kind of planted an initial seed, but I still had in my mind, I wanted to be a sociology professor. And so I was on the path to apply to grad programs. And I took a year off to nanny 3 great kids. And then I ended up in Tucson, Arizona at the University of Arizona getting my PhD in sociology. And during that, my research was still on midwifery and specifically home birth. And I was working with a home birth midwife in Tucson as part of my research. So I was going to prenatal appointments with her and births and postpartum visits, and then also interviewing families after their postpartum care ended as part of what I thought was going to be my dissertation research. I had finished my master's degree, I'd finished my PhD coursework, and then all of this passion was swirling in me, and I loved working with these families so much. And I had also been, kind of becoming a little bit more disenchanted with academia in the mix of all of this. And I eventually made the decision to resign from that program and then start my journey into birth work. And my partner and I both grew up in Mukilteo, actually. So we, before the pandemic started, we'd already made the decision to move back to the Seattle area. So we made that move in May of 2020. And now I'm just getting my footing in the birth community here in Seattle area. I am living in Seattle right now, but I serve the greater Seattle area. And just getting my footing as currently a postpartum doula. And then I hope to also be doing births starting this summer.
Lovely. Oh, that's so cool. What a fun story. That is wonderful. I saw on your website that you were in a PhD program, but it's so cool that it was around birth and midwifery. Do you still plan on, that research is still needed? Do you ever plan on synthesizing it or putting it out there?
I have still have all that data, and it's definitely something that I felt like emotionally I needed to put on the back burner for a little bit, not because that research means so much to me, but conducting research and going through the publication process and all of that was the piece of it I didn't enjoy as much. Yes. Of actually being with the families and talking to them about their stories. So it could still be in the cards. And, I'm also just trying to use everything I learned from those families and midwives, in a way that's also meaningful just through my work and how I interact with birth communities here, and just taking what I learned from all of them and applying it in a way that's, going to advance everyone's health and well-being, and the birth professions. So.
That's fantastic. That is so cool. Maybe one day you'll write a book on those stories, but it won't be so, it could still be the stories, right?
Yeah, I know. I'm inspired by you. I saw you published your book, and I'm once you know how hard that process is, you're just oh my gosh, anyone who publishes a book, I'm I could just feel all the hours and years of dedication to that.
Yeah.
So congratulations on that.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm excited for when yours comes out because it sounds like you have a lot of stories and you'll only collect more and more as you go. So I'm sure your story will change. But that's really cool. So how did the name Rove Perinatal Services come into play?
Oh my gosh. It's kind of, I wouldn't say it's a funny story, but it was just like, it just kind of happened. I was thinking, one day just sitting in my living room trying to brainstorm names, and I've kind of been known like within my friend group as like the person who challenges systems, and it's very much like the sociology in me of like, how can we challenge the system to be better? And so we have this joke that like I'm like a big wave sometimes that can come crashing in, and then that I also can sometimes rock the boat in ways that are important. So I was thinking of rock and wave, and then I just ended up combining the words, and it was Rove. And I was like, wait, Rove actually means like journey, to wander. And I was like, that is totally what my life is right now. Like I'm changing paths. I don't really know where this is all headed. Parenthood is just like a crazy path where no one knows where they're headed. And so, yeah, it just was like this aha moment of like, I wasn't even thinking specifically about that name. And then my brain just like created it for me. And yeah, so that's Rove.
Cool.
That's where that comes from.
Very cool. So tell me, so you currently are a postpartum doula. So what does that look like? Who are your clients? What are you doing for them? Kind of give me the rundown.
Yeah, so I'm just getting started. I am with my second family now, and then I just signed on with a third family that I'll be starting with in March. And all of the families that I've talked to or worked with so far, they all have, very different needs. And the one that I'm working with now, I'm just doing once a week, like 2-hour check-ins with. The family that I'm going to be working with starting March is hiring me on for 4 days a week for 12 weeks. Like I kind of am open to like, what do families need? And the postpartum doula role is very much like, how can you support the family unit? And I found that with the families I've worked with so far, typically right after birth, a lot of that is like birthing person focused of like, okay, how's your healing going? How are you feeling? How, if they're choosing to breastfeed, how is that relationship going? How can I support that? Like, how's the latch? Like, maybe doing some positioning. And then usually as postpartum goes on, my work can look a little different. Sometimes that means, maybe they're pumping now and have bottles and I'm feeding baby while they take a nap, or, even later in postpartum, maybe they like just want to, go downstairs and work out and they don't want a baby near them. And so then I'm upstairs doing dishes with the baby hanging out next to me. And it can just look like so many different things. But I think a lot of postpartum doulas would agree. It's like whatever the family needs, like what feels good to them, based on where they're at in their postpartum journey.
Lovely. Very cool. Do you do overnights, or like, are you an overnight doula?
I'm not doing overnights. I think some of that comes from my time as a birth assistant. Like overnights can like rock your system. And I just know from like all the times I've woken up in the middle of the night to have to go to a birth, I'm like, I don't think I could switch my schedule like that. So it's not anything I'm doing now. Maybe I'll eat my words in the future, but I think I'm wanting to reserve those nighttime awake times for going to birth starting in the summer.
Lovely. That's so cool. So how come starting in the summer? Because it sounds like you have a lot of birth experience.
Yeah, since I'm transitioning, I do have other part-time job right now. So
Cool.
I work as a para educator for Mukilteo School District. So I do that. Yeah, I do that on Zoom, just in the mornings and early afternoons. And then I've been working with families in the afternoon and evenings during the week. And I have some weekend flexibility. I mean, with all the stay-at-home order stuff, I'm not like planning trips or going anywhere. So my days kind of blur together. So I've been doing some weekend shifts for families too.
Lovely. So I know you said you serve the Seattle area. Do you serve Snohomish County as well then?
Yeah, I cast a wide net. So I am located in Bryant neighborhood of Seattle. So that's like right next to University Village, U Village. And I say that I travel 25-mile radius. So that gets me like, you know, up in Everett area a little further. And, you know, South Seattle, Renton area, and then east to like, you know, Bellevue, Sammamish. I haven't traveled that far yet, but, you know, I'm open to serving families in all areas. And so that includes, Snohomish and King County right now.
Lovely. Awesome. Tell me a little bit about your history, if you don't mind, of like being a birth assistant, kind of your street cred as far as your, as you go into taking more births.
Yeah. So I mostly during that time, and this is a little bit of just restriction based on being a researcher. So part of when you're doing graduate research or academic research, you have to go through the IRB, which is like this review board that approves your research. And pretty much a condition of me doing the research that I was doing was that I couldn't really do anything medical. So, which doulas don't do, but typically birth assistants do. You know, they might prepare certain medications or different things. So it was more of, I did a lot of charting. So pretty much all the prenatal, oh my gosh, I must have gone to over like 400 prenatal appointments. I was the one doing all the charting, and the midwife just did everything during the visit, and she didn't have to worry about charting. And then births, I mostly did charting too, but it was also like as time went on and I could feel within myself that like I was a birth worker and not going to be an academic. I felt like I was stepping into more of a doula role the more births I went to. So that was, you know, I was boiling water on the stove and like getting warm compresses ready for perinatal support. And I also took a lot of photos at birth. So I kind of like turned into the birth photographer. And yeah, so my role kind of evolved, but I almost always was the one charting, like at all the appointments and the births. But I think that really, that helped me see the things that like midwives see during births, right? Like I caught on to the way they would talk about things. I always like to tell the story of the first birth I went to. I was still a grad student, so I was TAing for courses, and I was in the class I was TAing for, and I got a text from the midwife, and she said, "Oh, the client is starting to sing," and I was just like, starting to sing, am I supposed to know what that means? Like, is she literally singing? Like, what, like, should I text back like, what song? But like, that's this midwife anyway. I don't know if midwives in the Seattle area say this, but like that usually means like the person's in active labor. They're probably like getting close to transition. If they're not hitting transition right now, they're getting more vocal. So like these things that I learned to hear at births and know, okay, I'm charting this now because the midwife said this thing. So it was a lot of like developing my skills of being able to recognize certain patterns in births and different ways that we might need to be getting ready to support based on how things are feeling, how things are sounding, how things are looking. So yeah, it was a really great time for me just to learn those things that now I can recognize, and I just need more of the practical skills. So I'm in a birth doula class currently through the Simpkins Center. And so I'm eager to like learn all the different like counter pressure techniques and hip squeezes and all those things that like I just wasn't really doing because I was the one who was just charting what was happening. So yeah, I'm looking forward to just continuing to develop my skills more and then start working with some families this summer once I end this paraeducator job and transition into full-time work as a doula.
That's so lovely. Oh, how exciting. What a fun path you're on. And just to back up, a random comment is like, wow, that you moved during COVID.
I know.
And like all of it. And I know Arizona is a completely different culture there. So, you probably got to Seattle and it's like, what? Nothing's open. Like people don't see each other. But that's why I guess it's really lovely that you can, I think it's so important, especially during this pandemic, that people have support when they're not necessarily seeing their families, right? So to feel like they have a trusted doula that they can see safely, right? And it's so nice.
Yeah. And I will say, I mean, all doulas like have their own limitations, but of the doulas I've talked to, like I've just been so impressed with how dedicated everyone is to this work. Like people have really put their lives on hold to be able to serve families. Like a lot of doulas are not going anywhere, doing anything, choosing to only work with one family at a time. Like people are really like just totally changing their careers and their family life to be able to serve families right now. So I think I just want to encourage families who are maybe on the fence thinking, can I trust someone? Doulas are like, a lot of them are being so cautious and extra safe right now. And I think it's a great option for people that are needing extra support because they maybe are not seeing family or friends at this time.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. That's so great to hear too. And I've seen doulas, at least on social media, get like the COVID vaccine. So they're considered healthcare providers that can get the vaccine if they believe in that or if that's right for them.
Yeah, I was so happy to hear that too. I have my first dose and then I get my second dose coming up here in a few days. So I think most doulas are like close to being fully vaccinated and this is beginning of February. So probably by end of February, a lot of them will be fully vaccinated and that's great.
Yeah, so fun. So nice to hear. So like such a breath of fresh air. So, that's great. Is there anything that you want to talk about or that you think is important that's kind of specific to what kind of your mojo is, your vibe, your energy, whatever you want to call it, that you would want people to know about you and like maybe the reason someone would, think about hiring you or working with you, like kind of what's your jam? I don't know how else to say it.
I would say definitely because of my sociology background, my jam is thinking about how we personally can challenge the way we think about systems and how we can like actually change and challenge systems. So like I know as a doula, sometimes there is this belief that a doula is only there to educate. They never speak on behalf of their clients, but a lot of doulas, birth doulas I'm talking about now, are starting to push back on that and say, you know what, we have a system that is not always great to birthing people and families. And, part of the role of the doula is to be able to like interrupt those situations. And I would say I passionately believe in that and come into that role. And that's my jam, and not everyone wants that, but I really believe, hospitals, I'll take a step back. As a sociologist, I always taught my students like a basic tenet of sociology is that a lot of things in life are socially constructed. So what that means is not everything that we do is based in science. And you would think with birth, like, oh, everything a provider is going to do or everything a hospital is going to do has to be based in science or they wouldn't be doing it. But so much of what hospitals or providers do, unfortunately, is because it brings in profit. And I know that's not what people want to hear. It's not what people want to believe. It doesn't make anyone feel good to know that that's prioritized over their own desires. But as a doula, I come into this work with that lens, and that's something I step into a relationship with of, if you want to be in the hospital for your birth, I want to support you in that, but I also want you to be informed enough to know why certain things might be recommended. Not everything is based in, not everything's medically indicated. Sometimes there's reasons that things are being done that, we don't want to admit, like maybe a cesarean is being recommended because a provider has a lot of fear surrounding, lawsuits, malpractice, and that might be something they want to do to protect themselves, versus honoring what your desire might be for your own birth. And it's not to say every provider is like that or every hospital system is like that, but this is the system we work in. This is what some people are calling the medical industrial complex, or the MIC right now, just this prioritization of profit over people's desires. And so I would say challenging that is my jam. I think some hospital experiences, people don't encounter that, and they have beautiful births because they feel in control, and maybe they felt like they did have to step in to challenge things at certain points, or they didn't. But then there's also people who have births that, they're coming up against instances of neglect or just misinformation coming from providers, or things where it's good to have that extra education and support from a doula to be able to step in and interrupt those situations, even if maybe you're not able to challenge it, but at least give yourself the time to process the next steps of, what's coming in your care. So yeah, that's kind of, I would say that's my baseline. That's where I start from. That's all my training coming from the world of sociology into birth work. And yeah, I would love to support families that align that way, families who also don't align that way. I also love just being an emotional support person or physical support person. And I think that's part of the beauty of doula work, is like, this isn't about doulas, it's about the client. And I'm here to honor what the client wants. And if they want me to turn off my analytical brain, like, I can do that too. But I would say that I would guess probably the people who would choose to work with me are the ones that can also appreciate that analytical part of me and want that present at their birth.
Oh, that's really cool to hear. Yeah, it's so interesting that you just talked about that, because I don't really, even as like a medical provider myself, like, you forget we don't work with insurance. So I don't have that hanging over my head. I don't have that like, oh, we have to do this many units and this much stuff, and this dictates that, right?
Yeah.
So I feel blessed for that, but I also forget that it is so ingrained in how most people practice, who are dictated by some oversight payer, and yeah, that is sad. And I'm so optimistic that it's hard to see that side of things sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That was really good. And I think that I hate to want to even say that that's the truth, but I mean, I work with so many people that have delivered, and like, everyone has such a diverse story, and you're just like, how in the world did some of these things happen?
Yeah.
Did they need to happen? And of course you're not there, or I'm not there during that time when I'm hearing these things, but it just, you forget that, yeah, that's part of the system. That is part of the system. And you just don't want that to be the case. So I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that's important for anyone who's birthing to really hear. So I guess kind of like on top of that, do you have certain preferences as far as supporting birth when you do start taking your own birth clients, supporting birth in a birth center or home birth or hospital birth? Are you limited to any of those? Or are you open to all of it?
I'm open to all of them. I think the only restriction I have right now because of COVID is if doulas are allowed in certain hospitals. So
Okay.
it seems like in this area, for the most part, hospitals are allowing one like certified doula. I've heard of for sure one hospital south that is not allowing doulas right now. So yeah, I'm open to all locations. It's just also an access issue for doulas right now. And that's probably a whole other podcast of like, what does certification mean in terms of a doula? Because there's so many amazing doulas that don't choose the path of certification. And I don't know what barriers they're facing right now with getting into hospitals. But yeah, my understanding is certified doulas are allowed at most hospitals right now with the COVID restrictions that are in place.
Gotcha.
But hopefully by the time I start doing births in August or late July, I'm kind of like looking at that time of taking my first clients. Hopefully by then I'll, maybe at least be certified, or if I'm not, hospitals have like opened up their policies a little bit more.
Yeah, very cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing. This has been really beneficial. Is there anything you want to leave the listeners with or leave us with that you're excited about? Maybe that's upcoming or something that we should know?
Yeah, I mean, definitely reach out if you're thinking about maybe having a doula or you want more information. Like, I just love talking about this stuff. And I feel like a lot of the time people just don't even really know where to start. And there's so many doulas in this area, like Seattle area. It's just, I mean, there's really like no comparison to the support that you have in the birth community of Seattle. So just start, reaching out to people, talking about it. Chances are by this point, people actually know about home birth and midwives and doulas, whereas maybe even 5 to 10 years ago, people didn't really know or weren't talking about it. So yeah, feel free to reach out if you want to talk more. I'm also really passionate about people knowing all of their options. So I'm hoping sometime this summer I can get a program off the ground just for people who are newly pregnant and don't really know where to start, don't really know, what kind of provider do I want? And learning all of the different types of providers is really intimidating because there's OBs, there's CNMs, there's LMs, there's CPMs. Like, the different types of midwives in the US are just insane and hard to navigate. And I love talking about all of that and the different options in terms of, what kind of provider can you have at a hospital versus a birth center versus home birth, and what are their scopes of practice and limitations. And so yeah, hoping to get some sort of maybe monthly kind of just donation-based program off the ground where people can join and ask all the questions they have about different birth options and provider options. Yeah, I mean, sky's the limit. Like, I'm just starting out. So even if people have ideas of like, hey, I've been looking for this, but can't find it. I'm definitely open to what people need in their communities right now.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much, Ashley. This has been really wonderful. We will drop your website, and if you have like any social media, we will put that in the show notes.
Okay.
And yeah, do you have a handle or anything that we should know?
I have not started my business Instagram yet.
Yes.
I mean, I do have like the name reserved on Instagram,
Great.
but if you found, I don't know if it's Rove Perinatal or Rove Perinatal Services. If you found it, I would have like no followers, no posts, but maybe one day I'll get off the ground.
Cool.
But yeah, my website, roveperinatal.com, is the best place to find more information about me, and my contact information's on my website as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate it. And I know it will help a lot of people. So
Thank you, Allison.
yeah. Take care. Bye.
The Edmonds Mom's Room podcast is brought to you by Body Motion Physical Therapy. We help women through pregnancy and beyond so they can live active, confident, and healthy lives.